The words hit me like a physical blow, a concussive force that seemed to suck all the air from the sterile, over-chilled conference room. "You're clearly delusional," Leonard Massey said, his voice, once a source of comfort and guidance, now echoing with a cold, dismissive cruelty. It reverberated off the polished mahogany table, the floor-to-ceiling glass walls, and the stunned, averted faces of the other partners. Desperate women like you always make things up. Every pair of eyes, which moments before had been fixed on me with a predatory curiosity, now skittered away, finding sudden, intense interest in their leather-bound notepads or the Denver skyline beyond the window. I felt a hot flush of shame and fury creep up my neck, but I held my expression neutral, a mask of calm I had perfected over 6 long years. I had learned that much during my tenure at Halcyon Strategic Advisors. Never let them see you break. It was the first rule in the unwritten handbook of corporate survival, a lesson I thought I had mastered. I was wrong. My name is Tiana Brooks, and I am 32 years old. For the past 6 years, my entire professional life had been poured into the foundation of this prestigious consulting firm. I had started as a junior analyst, wide-eyed and ambitious, and climbed the ladder with a relentless work ethic. I sacrificed weekends, holidays, and countless evenings, fueled by black coffee and the burning desire to prove myself. And I had. I was a senior analyst now, respected for my precision, my calm under pressure, and my leadership. I had built a reputation that I thought was my armor. As I sat in that sterile conference room, the silence punctuated only by the soft scratching of a pen, I watched my colleagues avoid eye contact. I realized that everything I had worked for, the entire scaffold of my career, was crumbling around me. But what Leonard Massey, the senior partner who had just publicly humiliated me, did not know, what none of them in that room knew, was that I had been preparing for this moment for months. Every inappropriate text message, every uncomfortable encounter, every time his hand lingered too long on my shoulder during meetings, I had documented it all. The meeting ended with my termination. Performance concerns, they called it a vague, corporate-speak dagger designed to leave no mark. I nodded politely, a perfect marionette of compliance. I gathered my things from the chair beside me, my hand steady despite the tremor I felt deep in my core. I walked out of that building with my head held high. Leonard watched me go with a satisfied smirk playing on his lips, the kind of self-assured expression a man wears when he believes he is utterly and completely won. He had no idea what was coming. 6 months earlier, everything had seemed perfect. My professional life, at least, was a well-oiled machine humming along the track to success. I had just been promoted to senior analyst after my work on the Meridian account had earned praise from the entire executive team. It was a complex, high-stakes project that had everyone else running scared, but I thrived on that kind of pressure. I saw the patterns others missed, the subtle shifts in the market that foretold major opportunities. Leonard had been my mentor since the day I started at Halcyon. He was charismatic, brilliant, and held a legendary status within the firm. He had taken me under his wing, guiding my career with what I thought was genuine interest in my professional development. He'd champion my ideas in meetings, give me credit where it was due, and push me to take on bigger challenges. He was a family man, often speaking fondly of his wife, Patricia, and their 2 teenage daughters. I'd met Patricia at several company events. She was lovely, always asking about my family with a genuine warmth that made me feel like more than just an employee. The professional, almost fatherly, image of Leonard made the first inappropriate message all the more jarring. It came on a Thursday night in February. I was working late, the only one left on our floor, finalizing a presentation for a major client. The office was a cavern of silent, empty cubicles, the city lights of Denver glittering outside my window.
My phone buzzed on the desk.
It was Leonard. "You look beautiful when you're concentrated. I've been watching you from my office." I stared at the message, a cold knot forming in my stomach. I looked up towards the corner offices, but his was dark. He must have left. Was this some kind of joke? A text meant for his wife, Patricia? I decided to ignore it, chalking it up to a clumsy mistake. It was easier to believe that than to confront the unsettling alternative. But then the messages continued. They started innocently enough. Compliments about my appearance. That color really suits you, Tiana. Comments about my clothes. I like that dress. It shows off your confidence. They were subtle, easily deniable, but they created a current of discomfort that ran beneath every interaction. Then came the questions about my personal life, questions that were far too intimate for a boss to ask an employee. Was I seeing anyone? What did I do on my weekends? He'd ask with a probing intensity that made my skin crawl. My sister, Victoria, a sharp-witted employment lawyer in Chicago, was the first person I told. We were on one of our weekly video calls, me with a glass of wine in my Denver apartment, her with a cup of tea in her high-rise. Tiana, this isn't right, she said, her brow furrowed with concern. This is classic grooming behavior. You need to start documenting everything. Every text, every comment, every time he makes you feel uncomfortable. Date, time, what was said, who was there. Everything. I don't want to make a big deal out of it, I argued, feeling a wave of exhaustion. He's Leonard Massey. He's probably just being friendly in a weird, old-fashioned way. No, Victoria said, her tone leaving no room for argument. Friendly doesn't make your stomach turn. Trust your gut. And protect yourself. Create a file. On your personal phone. On your personal cloud. Not on your work devices. If this escalates, you'll need proof. I wished I had listened to her sooner, but a part of me was still in denial. I didn't want to believe that the man who had built my career was also trying to systematically dismantle my sense of safety. The breaking point came on a rainy Tuesday in April. I was reviewing quarterly reports, buried in spreadsheets, when my phone buzzed with another message from Leonard. This time, it wasn't just inappropriate. It was explicit. The message contained a photo I never wanted to see, a lewd, unsolicited image of himself, followed by words that made my hands shake and my vision swim. Thinking of you. Maybe we can discuss your career path in a more private setting. The message contained a photo I never wanted to see and words that made my hands shake as I read them. I immediately took a screenshot, my heart hammering against my ribs. I added it to the growing file on my phone, a secret archive of my daily dread. By this point, I had over 300 documented instances of harassment spanning 4 months, text messages sent at all hours, voicemails left on my direct line after I'd stopped answering his calls, and detailed, time-stamped notes about every uncomfortable encounter. That afternoon, sick with a mixture of fear and resolve, I made the decision to report Leonard to Human Resources. I scheduled a meeting with Jennifer Walsh, the head of HR. She was a woman in her late 40s with a practiced, reassuring smile. I sat at her office, my voice trembling slightly as I recounted the months of escalating harassment. I showed her the printed copies of some of the worst messages, my hands shaking so badly the papers rattled. Jennifer listened with a concerned expression, taking copious notes and assuring me that the company took these matters seriously. We'll launch an immediate and thorough investigation, Tiana, she promised, her eyes full of what I mistook for empathy. In the meantime, try to maintain professional distance from Mr. Massey. For 2 weeks, I heard nothing. I followed up with Jennifer, but my emails went unanswered. When I finally caught her in the hallway, she seemed confused. What complaint? She asked, shuffling through papers on her desk as if she couldn't quite recall our conversation. Oh, Tiana, I'm so sorry. I don't seem to have any record of our conversation. Are you sure you filed a formal complaint? My heart sank. The printed messages I had given her were nowhere to be found. It was as if our meeting had never happened. I realized then that Leonard's influence at Halcyon ran deeper than I had ever imagined. As a senior partner, he likely had connections throughout the company, including in HR. The department designed to protect me was protecting him instead. I decided to document our conversation with Jennifer as well, typing up detailed notes immediately after leaving her office. I also made multiple backup copies of all the evidence I had collected, storing them in different secure locations, a lesson from Victoria, to ensure they couldn't disappear like my HR complaint had. The harassment escalated. Leonard became bolder, sending messages during business hours, making increasingly explicit comments during team meetings, knowing he was untouchable. He seemed to believe his position protected him from any consequences. One Friday evening, as I was preparing to leave the office, Leonard appeared in my cubicle. "Tiana, I need to see you in my office," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. In his office, with the door closed, Leonard made his intentions crystal clear. "Your career at this firm depends on your cooperation," he said, his voice low and threatening. "I think you understand what that means." I stood up slowly, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my chest. "I understand perfectly," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. That weekend, I made copies of everything. Every screenshot, every voicemail, every note I had taken. I organized them chronologically, creating an irrefutable timeline of Leonard's behavior. I also researched the members of Halcyon's board of directors, identifying their email addresses and gathering information about their backgrounds. These weren't just names on a website. They were people who would understand the gravity of what I was revealing. On Monday morning, I walked into the office knowing it might be my last day. But I was ready for whatever Leonard threw at me. He had underestimated me completely, and that would be his downfall. The day of my termination, Monday morning, arrived with an ominous email in my inbox. Conference room B, 9 a.m. Mandatory attendance. It was signed by Jennifer Walsh from HR, but something felt wrong. Leonard's fingerprints were all over this. I spent the weekend preparing for war, but I wasn't ready for the ambush that awaited me. When I entered the conference room, Leonard was already there with Jennifer and two other senior partners I barely knew, David Harrison and Thomas Crawford. The setup screamed intimidation. "Tiana, please sit down," Jennifer said, her tone formal and cold, completely different from our previous conversation that she had mysteriously forgotten. "We need to discuss some serious allegations that have been brought to our attention." My stomach dropped. Allegations against me? Leonard sat back in his chair, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. He was enjoying this. "It has come to our attention," Jennifer continued, reading from a prepared statement, "that you have been making false accusations against Mr. Massey. This behavior is completely unacceptable and violates our company's code of conduct." I felt the room spinning. "False accusations? I have documentation of everything," I managed to say, my voice a hoarse whisper. "Documentation can be fabricated," Leonard interrupted smoothly. "I've seen desperate women do this before. When they realize their career isn't advancing as quickly as they'd hoped, they look for someone to blame." The words "desperate women" hit me like a slap. David Harrison and Thomas Crawford nodded along, clearly having already been briefed by Leonard's version of events. I realized this entire meeting was orchestrated to discredit me before I could take my evidence further. "I want to see this alleged documentation," Jennifer said, extending her hand. This was the trap. If I showed them my evidence now, they could claim it was fabricated. If I didn't, they could use my refusal against me. I made a split-second decision that would change everything. "I don't have it with me," I lied smoothly, "but I can bring it tomorrow." Leonard's smile widened. "Of course you don't, because it doesn't exist," he sneered. "These are very serious accusations you're making, Tiana," David Harrison said, his voice stern. "False harassment claims can destroy careers and reputations. We cannot tolerate this kind of behavior at Halcyon." The irony was suffocating. Here I was, being lectured about destroying careers, while Leonard sat smugly across from me, having done exactly that to me and who knows how many other women. "We're placing you on administrative leave, pending a full investigation," Jennifer announced. "You'll need to surrender your company phone and laptop immediately." My heart raced. They were cutting off my access to the evidence stored on my work devices. But I had anticipated this move and backed everything up to my personal accounts weeks ago. "I understand," I said calmly, sliding my company phone and laptop across the table. Leonard leaned forward. Tiana, I want you to know this gives me no pleasure. I've always tried to support your career here. But when someone makes false accusations, he shook his head sadly, playing the wounded mentor perfectly. As I gathered my personal items, I noticed Thomas Crawford watching me with a strange expression. Unlike the others, he didn't seem entirely convinced by Leonard's performance. I filed that observation away for later. Walking to my desk to collect my things, I felt the weight of everyone's stares. Word had clearly spread about the meeting, and my colleagues whispered among themselves as I passed. Some looked sympathetic, others seemed to believe I had gotten what I deserved. At my desk, I carefully packed my personal belongings, making sure to grab the small external drive hidden in my drawer, my insurance policy. As I loaded the last box into my car, I allowed myself one moment of genuine emotion. A single, hot tear traced a path down my cheek. 6 years of my life gone. But Leonard had made one crucial mistake. He thought destroying my career would silence me. Instead, it had freed me to tell my story, without fear of professional consequences. That evening, I sat in my apartment with my laptop open, staring at the folder containing over 300 screenshots. The evidence was damning, but I needed to be strategic about how I used it. Leonard had outmaneuvered me at Halcyon, but the game wasn't over. I called my sister Victoria, who had been my anchor throughout this nightmare. "They fired you?" she asked, incredulous. "After what he did to you?" "Technically, I'm on administrative leave, but we both know how this ends," I replied. "Victoria, I need your legal advice. What's my best move here?" Victoria, who specialized in employment law at her firm in Chicago, was quiet for a moment. "You have 2 options. File a lawsuit, which could take years and might not get the justice you deserve, or what? Go nuclear. Take this to the board, the media, social media. Make it impossible for them to ignore or cover up." I had been thinking the same thing. Leonard's power came from operating in the shadows, using his influence to silence women before their stories could gain traction. But what if I removed his ability to control the narrative? "The board meeting," I said suddenly. "Halcyon's quarterly board meeting is this Thursday. I saw it on the company calendar." "Perfect timing," Victoria agreed. "Board members hate surprises, especially ones that could expose the company to liability." I spent the next 2 days crafting the most important presentation of my life. Not a PowerPoint full of business metrics, but a comprehensive timeline of Leonard's harassment, complete with screenshots, dates, and context. I researched each board member, understanding their backgrounds, and what would motivate them to act. Margaret Chen, the board chairwoman, had built her career championing women in business. Robert Singh had daughters my age. Patricia Williams had recently joined after a high-profile sexual harassment scandal destroyed her previous company. Wednesday night, I couldn't sleep. I kept rehearsing what I would say, how I would present the evidence. But doubt crept in during the quiet hours. What if they didn't believe me? What if Leonard had already poisoned them against me? Then, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "I know what Leonard did to you. You're not the first. Be strong tomorrow." The message was unsigned, but it was the validation I desperately needed. Someone inside Halcyon was supporting me. Thursday morning, I dressed carefully in my best suit, the navy blue one I had worn to my promotion interview 2 years ago. I wanted to look professional, credible, strong. I arrived at Halcyon's headquarters 30 minutes before the board meeting, knowing security would try to stop me. "I'm here to address the board," I told the receptionist, my voice calm and confident. "You don't have an appointment," she replied, clearly uncomfortable. "I have information the board needs to hear regarding potential legal liability for the company." The magic words, legal liability, opened doors quickly. Within minutes, I was escorted to a waiting room outside the boardroom. Through the glass walls, I could see the board members taking their seats. Leonard was there too, presenting what looked like quarterly financial reports. Margaret Chen stepped out to speak with me personally. "Miss Brooks, I understand you have concerns to raise with the board." Yes, ma'am. Concerns that could result in significant legal exposure for Halcyon if not addressed immediately. She studied my face for a moment, then nodded. We'll hear you after Mr. Massey finishes his presentation. As I waited, my hand steady despite my racing heart, I thought about all the women who had probably sat in similar rooms with similar evidence, only to be silenced or dismissed. Today, that pattern would end. Leonard's presentation ended with enthusiastic applause from the board. He had just finished explaining how his division had exceeded revenue targets by 15% when Margaret Chin announced that I would be addressing them next. I watched Leonard's face carefully as I entered the room. His confident smile faltered for just a moment before he recovered his composure. I'm not sure why Miss Brooks is here, he said smoothly. She's currently on administrative leave pending an investigation into some concerning behavior. Mr. Massey, please take a seat, Margaret said firmly. Miss Brooks, you have our attention. I had practiced this moment dozens of times, but standing before 9 board members felt surreal. These were some of the most powerful people in Denver's business community, and they were about to see Leonard's true character. Thank you for allowing me to speak, I began, connecting my laptop to the projector. I'm here to present evidence of systematic sexual harassment by Mr. Leonard Massey, evidence that human resources has mysteriously lost or ignored. The room went silent. Leonard started to object, but Margaret silenced him with a look. Over the past 4 months, I continued, clicking to my first slide, I have documented over 300 instances of inappropriate communication and behavior from Mr. Massey. The first screenshot appeared on the screen, one of Leonard's more explicit text messages, complete with timestamp and his phone number clearly visible. Several board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This message was sent at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, I explained. I was working late on the Henderson account when I received it. Note the date. This was 3 days after I reported to HR that Mr. Massey was making me uncomfortable. I clicked through more slides, each one more damning than the last. Photos Leonard had sent that I had to carefully obscure for the presentation. Voicemails transcribed word for word. A detailed timeline showing how his behavior escalated after I tried to set boundaries. Leonard's face had gone pale. This is clearly fabricated, he said, his voice cracking slightly. Anyone can fake text messages these days. You're absolutely right, I replied calmly. That's why I also have the original messages on my phone, complete with metadata that can be verified by any digital forensics expert. Robert Singh leaned forward. Miss Brooks, you mentioned that HR lost your complaint? Yes, sir. I met with Jennifer Walsh, provided printed copies of evidence, and filed a formal complaint. 2 weeks later, when I followed up, she claimed to have no record of our meeting or the evidence I provided. Then Patricia Williams, who had been taking detailed notes, looked up sharply. That's a very serious allegation against our HR department. Which is why I documented that conversation as well, I said, clicking to another slide showing my typed notes from the meeting, complete with date and timestamps. The room was dead silent, except for the sound of keyboards as board members took notes. Leonard sat frozen, his earlier confidence completely evaporated. There's one more thing, I said, clicking to my final slide. Yesterday, I received an anonymous message suggesting I'm not the first woman Mr. Massey has harassed at this company. Margaret Chen's expression hardened. Thank you, Miss Brooks. We'll need copies of all this evidence for our investigation. Of course, I replied, ejecting a USB drive from my laptop. Everything is here, along with additional documentation. As I gathered my materials, Leonard finally found his voice. You're destroying my family, my career, over a misunderstanding. No, I interrupted, looking him directly in the eyes. You destroyed your own career the moment you decided to abuse your power. Walking out of that boardroom, I felt lighter than I had in months. The truth was finally out, and there was no putting it back in the box. 24 hours after my presentation to the board, Leonard Massey's career at Halcyon Strategic Advisors was over. I learned about it not from an official announcement, but from watching through the window of a coffee shop across the street as security escorted him from the building, carrying a single cardboard box. My phone had been ringing all morning. Victoria called first. It's all over the industry blogs already. Senior partner terminated following harassment investigation. You did it, Tiana. But the most satisfying call came from Margaret Chen herself. Miss Brooks, I want to personally apologize for what you endured at our company. The board has voted unanimously to terminate Mr. Massey's partnership and begin a comprehensive review of our HR practices. The investigation that followed was swift and thorough. Jennifer Walsh was placed on administrative leave pending review of how she had handled my initial complaint. Within a week, 2 other women came forward with their own stories about Leonard, their courage bolstered by seeing that someone had finally been believed. Leonard tried to control the narrative one last time, issuing a statement through his lawyer claiming he was the victim of a coordinated attack by disgruntled employees. But the evidence was too overwhelming, too detailed, too thoroughly documented for anyone to question its authenticity. The text message that had started everything, that first inappropriate comment about how I looked while working late, became the centerpiece of news articles about the case. Legal experts praised the thoroughness of my documentation, calling it a textbook example of how to build a harassment case. 3 weeks after Leonard's termination, I received an unexpected phone call that would reshape my entire career trajectory. The caller introduced herself as Rebecca Morrison, senior partner at Pinnacle Risk Solutions, one of Halcyon's biggest competitors. Miss Brooks, I've been following your situation closely, she said. What you did took incredible courage, and frankly, it's exactly the kind of integrity we value at Pinnacle. The offer she made was stunning. Director of Risk Strategy, a position 2 levels above what I had held at Halcyon, with a salary increase of 40%. But more than the money or the title, it was the respect in her voice that moved me. We need leaders who aren't afraid to do the right thing, even when it's difficult, Rebecca continued. Your reputation in this industry is impeccable, and after what you've been through, every firm in Denver knows you're someone who can be trusted completely. The irony wasn't lost on me. Leonard's attempt to destroy my career had actually elevated it. By trying to silence me, he had made me impossible to ignore. My story had spread throughout the consulting industry, and instead of being seen as a troublemaker, I was viewed as someone with unshakable integrity. I accepted Pinnacle's offer immediately. On my first day, Rebecca introduced me to the team with words that still give me chills. This is Tiana Brooks, our new Director of Risk Strategy. Some of you may know her story. She's proven that she'll always choose what's right over what's easy, and that's exactly the kind of leader we need. The consulting world is smaller than most people realize. Word traveled fast that Pinnacle had not only hired me but promoted me to a senior leadership position. Leonard's attempt to blacklist me had completely backfired. As I settled into my new office, looking out over downtown Denver from the 23rd floor, I reflected on how the past few months had unfolded. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't planned. It's simply allowing the truth to speak for itself while refusing to be silenced.